The words hit him like a physical blow, each syllable dripping with a contempt that had nothing to do with his record and everything to do with the color of his skin. "You'll be on latrine duty," Captain Mason declared, his gaze sweeping over Elijah Eli Turner, with a dismissive disdain that echoed through the ranks of soldiers lined up before him. The young men around Eli shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting away, unwilling to meet his gaze, as if looking directly at him might somehow taint their own worth. It was the summer of 1943, and Fort Benning, Georgia, basked under an oppressive sun that seemed to hang low in the sky, a relentless sentinel watching over the sweat-drenched training grounds. The air was thick with humidity, clinging to the skin like a heavy blanket, and the cacophony of shouting voices and clanging metal filled the atmosphere with a sense of urgency. Yet amidst the chaos, Eli felt an alienation that gripped him tighter than the heat. He stood there, the youngest in his regiment, a mere shadow among men who dwarfed him in size and experience. Eli had always been a fighter. Raised in a modest home in Alabama, he had learned to navigate life with resilience and tenacity. He could field strip an M1 Garand in under a minute, blindfolded. His marksmanship scores at Camp Walters had been the highest in his company. Yet here, on this humid training field, none of that seemed to matter. The captain's words rang in his ears, a cruel reminder that his skin color had relegated him to the margins of this war, reduced him to menial tasks, while others were chosen for the glory of combat. As the rest of the unit prepared for their missions, Eli trudged to the latrines, the stench of disinfectant mixing with the sweat that dripped down his back. Every step felt like a betrayal of his potential, a constant reminder of the racial divide that separated him from his peers. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of gunfire, the sharp report of rifles echoing through the trees, and with each crack, his heart ached for the chance to prove himself, to show that he was more than just a boy with a shovel. Private Jake Thompson, a soldier from Kentucky with a kind heart and an easy smile, caught up with Eli as he scrubbed the latrine floor. "Don't let them get to you, Eli," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "You know you're better than this." Jake had seen Eli's skills firsthand during their training sessions, where Eli would effortlessly take down targets while others struggled to hit the broadside of a barn. But the injustice weighed heavily on Eli, the dismissive looks from the other soldiers, the whispered comments that trailed behind him like shadows, each one an arrow piercing his resolve. He could see it in their eyes, the certainty that he would fail, that he had to fail, because to succeed would shatter the comfortable lie they had built their world upon. "Everyone's counting on you, Eli," Jake continued, his words offering a flicker of hope. "You just wait. They'll see." Yet, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that proving himself would take more than just skill. It would take a miracle. The clock was ticking, and with each passing day, the war loomed closer, a specter that threatened to consume them all. Would he even get the chance to fight, or would he be forever relegated to the shadows? As he scrubbed the floor, a deep resolve began to churn within him. In that moment, Eli made a silent promise. He would not remain invisible. One day they would see him, not just as a soldier, but as a man worthy of respect. Before we continue, let us know in the comments what you would do in Eli's position. Imagine facing such injustice and still finding the strength to fight back. We want to hear your thoughts. Now, back to Eli's journey. The days dragged on, each filled with the stench of sweat and the weight of unspoken prejudices. Eli watched as his fellow trainees were sent off on missions, their faces bright with excitement and fear. He remained behind, mopping floors and cleaning toilets, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he was capable of so much more. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Eli found himself alone, practicing his combat moves in the fading light. The rhythmic thud of his feet against the ground echoed in the stillness, a mantra of determination that drowned out the doubts that threatened to consume him. Each strike of his fist against the invisible enemy was a declaration of his intent. He would not be defined by the color of his skin or the tasks assigned to him. With each passing day, Eli honed his skills in secret, pushing himself to the limits. He became a ghost on the training grounds, slipping away from the watchful eyes of the captains and the judgmental stares of the other soldiers. He trained in the early hours before dawn, the world still shrouded in darkness, and in the quiet of the night, when the stars twinkled overhead like a million tiny witnesses to his struggle. But even as he fought against the constraints placed upon him, the spectre of Captain Mason loomed large. The captain's scornful words echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the uphill battle he faced. Eli could feel the injustice seeping into his bones, fueling a fire within him that refused to be extinguished. In the weeks that followed, whispers of an impending deployment began to circulate among the troops. Excitement mixed with apprehension, and Eli's heart raced at the thought of finally being given a chance to fight. But with that hope came the realization that he must first survive the training, the very training that had thus far denied him his rightful place alongside his comrades. As the radio crackled to life one morning, announcing the details of their next mission, Eli's heart raced. "Reinforcements are 20 minutes out. Hold your position." 20 minutes. It might as well have been 20 years. Would he ever get to prove himself? Would they ever see him as more than just the boy with a shovel? Eli steeled himself, the weight of his dreams pressing down upon him. He was ready to rise above the injustice, to break free from the chains that held him back. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, he made a silent vow. He would fight, not just for himself, but for every soldier who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. The world around him may have been filled with chaos and discrimination, but in his heart, Eli knew that his story was just beginning. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty training grounds of Fort Benning. The air was thick with humidity, and Eli could feel the sweat trickling down his back beneath the weight of his uniform. It was only his second week in the military, yet it felt like an eternity. The scorn from Captain Mason lingered in his mind like a persistent echo, reminding him of his place in this world. In the distance, the sharp sounds of gunfire punctuated the air as the other soldiers underwent their training drills. Eli stood off to the side, a shovel in hand, while the men raced across the makeshift battlefield, rifles in tow. He was supposed to be digging trenches, but a part of him longed to join them. He could feel his heart racing, his fingers itching to hold a weapon, to prove he was more than just a laborer. As the day wore on, Eli's frustration grew. He watched as Private Jake Thompson, a fellow soldier, and one of the few who treated Eli with respect, was called to join a tactical exercise. Jake's face lit up with excitement, and he shot Eli a thumbs up before sprinting away. The camaraderie of the other soldiers was palpable, while Eli remained a figure on the fringe, the weight of his shovel a constant reminder of his marginalized status. "Hey, Turner," a voice shouted from behind him. It was Corporal Hayes, one of the more vocal men in the unit. "Don't get too comfortable with that shovel. You might just end up digging your own grave." Laughter erupted among the others, and Eli felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to lash out. Instead, he turned his back to them, focusing on the task at hand. It was during these moments that he felt the sting of his reality most acutely. The injustice of it all was a bitter pill to swallow, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now, not ever. In the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eli sat alone on a wooden crate. The sounds of laughter and camaraderie echoed around him, but he remained isolated, staring into the distance. A piece of paper crumpled in his pocket caught his attention. It was a letter from his mother, filled with words of encouragement and love. "Come home safe," she had written, and the weight of that promise pressed heavily on his heart. He could envision her sitting at the kitchen table, worry etched across her face as she penned those words. Eli's resolve hardened. He couldn't return home empty-handed. He needed to prove not just to himself, but to her that he was capable of more than what the world had assigned him. The next morning, Eli was determined to show his worth. During drill practice, he focused intently on every command, his body moving with precision despite the weariness that clung to him. He could see Captain Mason watching from the sidelines, his expression unreadable, but Eli sensed the skepticism, the doubt that still clouded the man's judgment. "All right, men, pair up for hand-to-hand combat," Lieutenant McCarthy shouted. Eli's heart raced. This was an opportunity. He quickly paired with Jake, who grinned at him, clearly ready to push their limits. "You can do this, Eli. Just remember what we practiced. Jake encouraged, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos around them. The fight began, and Eli found himself grappling with Jake. They moved quickly, the sounds of their bodies striking against each other filled with the adrenaline of the moment. Eli felt the rush of competition, the thrill of testing his strength and skill. Each time he landed a blow or managed to evade Jake's grasp, he felt a flicker of confidence ignite within him. But as the match went on, Eli could hear the snide remarks from the nearby soldiers. "Look at him trying, he thinks he's one of us," someone jeered. It pierced through him, a reminder of the uphill battle he faced. The laughter and whispers twisted in his gut, fueling his determination but also deepening his frustration. In a swift movement, Eli executed a perfect takedown, pinning Jake to the ground. For a brief moment, victory surged through him, but it was short-lived. He could see the faces of the other soldiers, their expressions shifting from amusement to surprise. The moment was fleeting, overshadowed by their inevitable dismissal of his triumph. "Nice move, Turner," Jake said, breathless beneath him, "but don't let it go to your head." Eli helped him up, both men laughing now, but the laughter felt hollow. As the drills continued, Eli noticed a shift in the atmosphere. A shadow passed over him, and he turned to see Captain Mason approaching. The man's expression was unreadable, but Eli's heart raced. Was this the moment he had been waiting for, or another opportunity to be belittled? "Turner," Mason said, his voice low and deliberate, "you've shown some improvement, but don't think for a second that a single good move has changed my mind about you." The words were like ice, cutting through any sense of achievement Eli had felt moments before. "Yes, sir," Eli replied, his voice steady despite the anger boiling within him. Mason continued, "You're still on latrine duty tonight. You're not a soldier, you're a liability." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Eli standing in a cloud of frustration and self-doubt. The injustice burned within him, a raw and palpable sensation. He could feel the eyes of his fellow soldiers on him, their unspoken judgments creating an invisible barrier. It was becoming increasingly clear that he would have to fight twice as hard to earn his place, not just in this unit, but in the eyes of the world around him. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eli found himself standing alone in front of the barracks, the weight of his shovel resting heavily at his side. He could hear the raucous laughter of the others echoing off the walls, but it felt like a distant memory. The camaraderie he longed for remained just out of reach. "Eli," Jake called, approaching him once again. "What's going on? You're not still thinking about Mason, are you?" Eli sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I'll ever get my chance. It feels like I'm stuck in this role forever." Jake shook his head, determination lighting his eyes. "You have to keep pushing. Just because he can't see your potential doesn't mean it's not there. I believe in you. You're more than what they say." Eli looked at his friend, a flicker of gratitude sparking in his chest. The support was a lifeline in a sea of doubt. "Thanks, Jake. I just wish everyone else could see it too." "Then show them." Jake's voice was firm. "Prove them wrong. Let's train harder together. We'll make sure they know who you really are." As they talked, the idea of fighting back against the odds began to take root in Eli's mind. He would train harder, learn faster, and refuse to let the injustices of his situation define him. This was just the beginning. Before we continue with Eli's journey, let us know in the comments, what challenges have you faced that made you stronger? Your stories matter and they help build our community. Now, back to Eli. As Eli prepared for the days ahead, he felt a renewed sense of purpose swelling within him. He was determined not just to survive, but to thrive, to carve out his own path in a world that seemed hell-bent on keeping him down. But the clock was ticking. The war loomed closer and the stakes were about to rise. Would he be able to prove himself before the opportunity slipped away? Stay tuned, as Eli's fight against adversity is just beginning. And if you believe in stories of resilience and courage, consider subscribing to our channel. Join us as we uncover more tales of those who dared to rise against the odds. Together we can honor their stories and ensure they are never forgotten. Eli's journey was just getting started, and the world was waiting to see what he was capable of. The day began with a deceptive calm, the sun peeking over the horizon, casting golden rays across the battlefield. Eli stood at the edge of the camp, staring at the makeshift training ground that had become his prison. His heart raced not from fear, but from the simmering anger that had built within him. Today was different. Today they would face real confrontation, and he was determined to prove himself. As the soldiers assembled, Eli could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. Captain Mason barked orders, his voice cutting through the morning air like a knife. Eli's stomach churned as he listened to the familiar sound of contempt lacing the captain's words. "You all know the mission. Secure the perimeters and hold your ground. And remember, Turner, latrine duty doesn't prepare you for real combat." The taunts flowed from Mason's lips like poison, and Eli clenched his fists at his sides, the sharpness of his nails digging into his palms, grounding him in the moment. The unit moved out, the sun climbing higher, the heat radiating off the ground in waves. The scent of sweat mingled with the musty odor of damp earth. Eli's senses heightened as they navigated through the wooded area, every crack of a twig beneath their boots sounding like a gunshot in the tense silence. They reached the designated training zone, a simulated enemy stronghold. Eli's heart pounded in his chest. They would be ambushed. He knew it instinctively. He had trained for this, yet doubt gnawed at him. Would he be able to lead? Would they believe in him? The ticking clock of their approach echoed in his ears. They had to complete the mission before their time ran out. "Stay sharp, boys," Mason cautioned, eyes scanning the tree line. "We're the best this army has to offer. Don't let a single one of you mess this up." Eli felt the familiar sting of dismissal. They were not a true unit in Mason's eyes. He was a liability, a burden, but he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. And then it happened. Gunfire erupted from the trees, sharp and deafening, echoing through the air like thunder. Bullets whizzed past, sending Eli's heart into a frenzy. The ambush was real, and the chaos was instantaneous. Men dropped around him, cries of pain and confusion filling the air. "Get down!" someone shouted, and Eli instinctively hit the ground, his face pressed against the cool earth. Adrenaline surged through him, sharp as the blade of a knife. He had trained for this moment, yet nothing could prepare him for the visceral reality of combat. The world around him blurred as he crawled forward, seeking cover. He spotted Private Thompson, his friend, pinned down behind a tree. "Eli!" Thompson yelled, his voice cracking, fear etched into his features. "We need to flank them." Eli's instincts kicked in. "Let's move." He didn't think twice as he pushed himself up, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of gunpowder. He could hear the thuds of bodies hitting the ground, the chaos erupting like a storm around him. As they maneuvered through the underbrush, Eli felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. He glanced down, blood seeping through his uniform. Panic surged within him, but he forced himself to breathe. "Keep going," he urged Thompson, gritting his teeth against the pain. The two soldiers advanced, moving from tree to tree. Eli's mind raced with tactics, analyzing the movements of the enemy. He needed to think quickly. They were outnumbered, but Eli had one advantage they hadn't taken into account: his training in hand-to-hand combat. He'd never thought it would come to this, but survival demanded it. Suddenly they were flanked. Eli's heart sank as he saw the enemy soldiers advancing toward them, rifles raised, their faces masks of determination. "We can't hold them off," Thompson yelled, panic creeping into his voice. Eli's decision was made in an instant. "Follow me!" He dashed forward, adrenaline overriding his fear, sprinting toward the nearest enemy soldier. He could feel the heat of the moment, the urgency of survival thrumming in his veins. He tackled the closest soldier, knocking him to the ground, the two grappling for control. The soldier was strong, but Eli had the element of surprise. He grabbed the man's knife, a glint of steel in his hand. With a swift motion, he drove the blade into the soldier's side. The gasp of disbelief echoed in his ears, and Eli felt a surge of power. He rolled off the body, adrenaline coursing through him as he faced the remaining enemy soldiers. "Let's go!" he shouted to Thompson, who stood frozen in shock. Eli lunged forward again, using the knife to take down another soldier, the blood splattering against his uniform. Each movement felt primal, instinctual. He was no longer the boy assigned to latrine duty. He was a soldier, fighting for his life and the lives of his comrades. The chaos intensified around him. Eli maneuvered through the fray, striking down soldiers with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed. He felt alive, his body moving in a fluid dance of survival. But just as hope began to swell within him, he turned and saw Mason at a distance, watching, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. In that moment, everything shifted. As Eli fought, he caught Mason's gaze, and in that split second, the captain's eyes held a flicker of respect, an acknowledgement of Eli's strength. But it was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Eli's heart sank as he heard Thompson's scream pierce the air. He spun around, seeing his friend crumple to the ground. "No!" Eli shouted, rage igniting within him. He charged toward the enemy, a whirlwind of fury and pain. He became a force of nature, fighting not just for survival, but for the brotherhood he had forged in the fires of adversity. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Thompson, for every soldier who had ever been overlooked, every soldier who had ever been told he wasn't enough. In a final surge of energy, Eli took down the last enemy soldier, standing amidst the chaos, breathing heavily, his hands covered in blood. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. He looked around, the grim reality of loss settling in. Bodies lay strewn across the ground, and the cries of the wounded echoed in his ears. As the dust settled, Eli turned to Mason, who approached cautiously, his expression unreadable. "What the hell just happened?" the captain demanded, his voice taut with disbelief. Eli met his gaze, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. "I fought," he said simply, the truth of it resonating deep within him. "I fought for all of us." Then came the twist, the revelation that would forever alter his path. Mason's eyes narrowed, and he leaned closer, a hint of something dark lurking beneath his words. "You think this changes anything? You think you've earned my respect?" he spat. "This was a fluke. You'll never be one of them." Eli felt the world tilt beneath him, the ground shifting as the weight of Mason's words settled in. Every ounce of pride he had felt moments before dissipated, replaced by a bitter truth. Mason's disdain had not vanished. It had merely morphed into a new form, a more insidious kind of contempt that would follow him. And in that moment, with blood still on his hands and the reality of war closing in, Eli understood that his battle was far from over. It wasn't just against the enemy on the battlefield. It was against the deep-seated prejudice that threatened to define him, to limit him. He had fought valiantly, but the fight for respect and recognition was a war of its own. He straightened, feeling a newfound resolve surge within him. "You don't get to define who I am, Mason," he declared, his voice steady. "I'll prove you wrong. I'll prove them all wrong." As the sun set behind him, casting long shadows over the battlefield, Eli Turner stood tall amidst the wreckage of war, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The fight for his worth had only just begun, and he was prepared to wield not just a knife, but every ounce of strength he had to carve his place in history. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted just moments ago. Eli stood in the aftermath of the ambush, his heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he surveyed the scene around him. Bodies lay strewn across the ground, some covered in the dust of battle, others still and quiet, their stories forever untold. He had fought not just for survival, but for the right to be seen, to be acknowledged as a soldier worthy of respect. Looking down at his hands, stained with the evidence of his actions, Eli felt a mixture of shock and determination. He had stepped into the role of leader when it mattered most, using nothing but his instincts and the skills he had honed in the shadows of his comrades. The knife in his grip now felt like a symbol of his transformation, not just a weapon, but a declaration of his strength, resilience, and undeniable worth. "Turner, you okay?" Private Thompson rushed to his side, eyes wide with a mix of admiration and concern. "You just took down 4 Germans single-handedly. They're calling you a hero." Eli shook his head, still trying to process the whirlwind that had consumed him. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us. We fought together." But deep inside, he knew the truth. This moment was pivotal not only for him, but for everyone who had ever doubted him. He had proven that he could rise above the titles and labels that had been unfairly thrust upon him. Captain Mason approached, his expression unreadable. Eli braced himself for another wave of disdain or dismissal, but instead, he saw something different flicker in the captain's eyes. Was it respect? "Turner, I didn't expect you to pull that off," he said, his voice low but steady. "You've shown more grit today than I gave you credit for. You've earned your place among us." The words hung in the air, heavy yet liberating. Eli felt a rush of validation wash over him. The journey to this moment had been fraught with doubt and oppression, but he had shattered those chains, proving that he was not defined by the color of his skin or the disdain of others. He was a soldier, a warrior, and he had the scars to prove it, each wound a testament to his struggle and survival. As the sun set, painting the horizon in hues of orange and purple, Eli gathered his men. They stood together, battered yet unbroken, and for the first time, he saw them nod in agreement, a silent acknowledgement of their shared experience. He took a deep breath, recalling the letter from his mother that he had kept close to his heart throughout this ordeal. "We're more than just soldiers. We're brothers. Let's honor those we lost today by fighting for each other and standing tall against the odds." The camaraderie that followed brought a warmth to his chest, a sense of belonging that he had long yearned for. They began to share stories and laughter, moments of humanity amidst the horror of war. Eli felt a profound connection with each of them, realizing that his fight was not solely for himself, but for everyone who had ever faced injustice. In the days that followed, Eli continued to lead with courage, fostering a spirit of unity among the soldiers, regardless of their backgrounds. He became a beacon of hope and strength, inspiring others to confront their fears and embrace their potential. The whispers of doubt that once surrounded him faded, replaced by a newfound respect that echoed in the barracks. One evening, as he sat by the fire with his comrades, Eli looked around at the faces illuminated by the flickering flames. He recognized the importance of sharing their stories, of their struggles, their losses, and their victories. They were more than soldiers. They were individuals with dreams, families, and lives worth fighting for. It was then that he decided to write a letter of his own, a letter that would be a testament to their journey, a reminder of what they had accomplished together. As he penned the words, he felt a sense of purpose swell within him. "Together we are stronger than the hate that has tried to divide us. Together we fight for a future where everyone is valued. Together we are unstoppable." The fire crackled softly, and with each stroke of the pen, Eli felt lighter. He had transformed from the boy tasked with latrine duty into a leader whose actions spoke volumes. He was not just fighting for acceptance, he was fighting for change. As the night deepened, Eli looked up at the starry sky, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. This was his moment, a culmination of all his struggles, fears, and hopes. He had become the hero he needed to be, not just for himself, but for every marginalized soul who had ever been pushed to the sidelines. And so, dear viewers, as we close this chapter of Eli's journey, we invite you to reflect on the stories that inspire you, that spark a fire within you to stand up against injustice. Eli's story is a reminder that we all have the power to rise above adversity and make a difference. If you believe in the strength of unity and the importance of sharing stories that matter, then join us. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of courage and resilience. Together, we can ensure that these stories are never forgotten. Comment below with your thoughts and share your own story of strength. Let's keep the conversation going. We'll see you on the next mission.